The topic of today's roundtable is Advancing Multiple Dimensions of Diversity at OHBM. This roundtable was planned by myself and some other members of the Diversity and Inclusivity Committee. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Rosanna Olsen. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Toronto and a senior scientist at the Rotman Research Institute in Toronto. Now I'll let Lucina Udine introduce herself.
Thanks, Rosanna, for organizing another roundtable this year. I'm Lucina Udine. I'm a professor in psychiatry and at the Semel Institute for Neuroscience at UCLA, and this year's outgoing chair of the Diversity Committee. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Pradeep, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, guys. And my name is Pradeep. I'm a faculty at the University of Pittsburgh, working on neuroimaging quality control, data science, and open science. Passionate about DIC. So I guess I should nominate somebody now. Maybe Fernanda.
Hi, I'm Fernanda. I'm a postdoc at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. I wanted to join this committee to understand more how I could contribute as a woman in Latin America working with structural neuroimaging.
Okay, let's go to Miriam next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Rosanna, for organizing this meeting. I'm Mariam Ziai, and I'm associate professor and group leader at the Calvin Institute for Systems Neuroscience in Norway. And part of the committee member of the DIC.
And Sariel.
Sariel.
Yes, thank you. I am Sarael Alcauter. I am from Mexico. I am a faculty at the National University of Mexico, working mainly with functional and structural neuroimaging.
So thank you so much for being here and attending this roundtable and contributing to the conversation. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to share some slides now. This is just to get people oriented to the topic of today, and then we're going to have more of a discussion. So in this roundtable today, I would like to talk about how things are currently done, how content is currently chosen for OHBM, and how we can improve the content in terms of its diversity and develop some best practices and guidelines for people submitting content, as well as the people who are in charge of selecting the content. And this is, I'll give some of the opinions that some of the members of the Diversity Committee have already come up with themselves, but I really hope that everybody on this call can also chime in and help us discuss these best practices so we can have the best possible discussion about this issue. So first of all, I have no disclosures, I should say. We already introduced ourselves, so I'll skip this slide. So first of all, for people who are new to the organization or who haven't attended many OHBM meetings, I just wanted to tell the audience what kinds of content is available at OHBM. And besides the posters, the main oral presentation formats take these different formats. So there's keynote talks, there's symposia, there's educational courses, there are roundtables such as this one, and there are also oral talks. And the oral talks are actually chosen from the abstracts that are submitted as posters. Now, to outsiders of the organization, you might not know how the content is selected at OHBM. So how do these keynotes get selected? Who chooses which symposia get offered? I will tell you that. So the program committee, which actually includes the current diversity and inclusivity chair, as well as some other members of the organization, are responsible for choosing the keynotes, symposia, roundtables, and oral talks. The keynotes are solicited, so that means that they are invited, they're asked. The symposia and roundtables are proposed by members, so by potential speakers. So every year there's a call for symposia content and roundtable content, as well as, and educational sessions, which we'll talk about next. And then there's also the oral talks, which, as I said, come from the posters. Now, the educational committee is a separate committee from the program committee. And that also consists of a representative from our group. So it includes the past year. So this year I was on the educational committee. So I helped choose the educational courses that will be offered at this year's OHBM. And this was very opaque to me before I joined any of the leadership at the OHBM. I had no idea how these the content was offered. So, I think it's helpful to just lay this out there and explain it. And also just talk about maybe how it differs from other organizations. So other organizations let their entire membership vote on the content that's offered at their yearly meeting, whereas this is much more driven by the leadership. So some of the things that are, and we actually have written a blog post about this topic as well that I'll try to link to this video somehow. But we have indicated that we have some suggestions for people to follow when they're planning, for example, content that they would like to present at OHBM. So if you're someone who wants to organize a symposia or an educational course, we put together, and this is not the entire list that we put in our blog, but we really wanted to emphasize, and this is something that's now required within the application itself, that speakers, potential speakers, consider several different factors in terms of diversity, in terms of what kinds of speakers are represented in their symposia. So some of those, and not limited to these, but some of those include the geographic locations from which their speakers live and work, the gender, the ethnicity, the career level. So for example, including people who are both senior and more junior when presenting co-presenters. So this is really important because what some people might not realize is that if the program committee doesn't receive a diverse set of speakers to choose from, then they're not going to, it's impossible to, achieve any sort of diversity at the meeting. So the onus is not only on the leadership and the program committee to choose diverse speakers, but it also is on the applicants for choosing these diverse sets of speakers for both the symposia and the educational courses. I will say that I think that this is something that people are improving year by year, and that because we have now a requirement for in the application form for members to describe how is your list of speakers diverse, in what ways, we have seen a lot of I think enthusiasm for this, and I think have seen some improvements in diversity. Would anybody else like to talk about how in other ways that we could improve diversity in terms of encouraging more diversity in our submissions? Pradeep?
Yeah, so I think this is a fantastic intro, Rosanna. They should include a recording of this in the emails they send in the submission. So far, I think you're talking about who gets selected on stage, for
Right.
keynotes and oral talks and stuff, but inclusion is much more than that, like you said, If, for example, getting more students from more underrepresented countries with travel fellowships and stuff, So are we gonna talk about just oral talks here this time?
That's for another, that's coming.
Okay.
But feel free, if there's anything that fits with this theme, feel free to express it now.
Can I?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, so go ahead and then I will go.
No, I just wanted to mention that, this is limited. The discussion so far has been limited to just who gets selected to have screen time, so to say,
Yes.
But inclusion is more
Yes.
than that,
Agreed. Miriam.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned regarding now this year we'll see more and more diversity compared to last year. It's interesting because we put this blog post and also implicitly triggered this kind of curiosity that presenter can invite co-presenters, and then so we provided a list of affinity groups that they might be able to kind of find. Not only from their closed groups that they are collaborating with, but others from other groups like minorities or others that they are a little bit distant from them. But we also suggested that, so for example, senior authors could suggest some mid-career or late career co-presenters, so then to get more visibility for that career stage, rather than just only senior authors and highly cited researcher to get the screen time or the floor. So I think that was one of the suggestions that I think we are following through. So hopefully we see more different career level coming through, like for the courses and then also for the symposia this year.
Definitely. One of the other things I didn't put on the slide, though, is something that we've talked about in the blog, is also having more diverse content from year to year. So sometimes we'll get the same sorts of courses and symposia, that the same sort of flavor sort of year after year. And so there's kind of this tension between, well, it was really popular last year, should we have it again? Or should we have something new? Should we feature something different? And again, it's, I think it would be sort of helpful to have more, just more variety of content sometimes. And again, that's kind of the people that are selecting the content are only limited are limited to what is available to them. So for what people put forward, but we've also talked about different ways of keeping track of what's been offered at different times, because that's historically, we haven't been very good at that. And because the committees rotate every year, you have to rely a lot on just the person's memory for what was offered in previous years. But we're trying to work more with leadership and with, the support teams to provide some of that information. So let me go to the next slide, which is more about kind of some, related topics, which is now when it goes to the program committee, when they are selecting, for example, their keynote speakers. So again, now this does not depend on what's submitted to them. This is solely driven by whatever the program committee thinks is hot, interesting, who's going to make a good speaker, who's going to bring a big draw, etc. And one of the things that we wrote about in our blog is that, by and large, when you see the names of the people that are giving the talks, there are going to be people that have really high, Google Scholar indices, really high citation counts. Those are the types of speakers that you see giving the talks. And so we just wrote some suggestions, which I'll offer here. And actually, Lucina, were you involved in part of this? So maybe do you want to speak to this part?
Yeah, I'm trying to go back to remember what exactly we said. I'm looking. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, publish, justify the selection criteria. Is that what you have? Yeah, it's what you have on the slide there.
Exactly.
And
do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Well, the thing is, I've been on program committee for many years, before my time on the diversity committee. And it's true, it's sort of who comes to mind as a good speaker. So the problem is the program committee has to be really diverse itself, has to include members from all over the world, has to have different career levels. And that's what we've been doing over the years, is trying to make sure the program committee itself is very diverse, because that's the only way we'll ensure we'll get speakers and cover the whole planet, which is what we're trying to do as an international organization. So that has always been challenging, because there are X number of spots. I don't know, is it 20 or something like that? And so we can't cover every dimension of diversity with just 20 individuals. So we have to rely on those folks being on the program committee to do the job of multiple people. Each one has to do the job of, covering a whole different aspects of diversity. And I personally think the most challenging part of all of this is that we are international. And so each country and each individual has their own lens that they're coming from. So if I'm in North America, let's say I'm an American, and our United States has a history of colonialism and slavery that creates certain underrepresented groups that are specific to the United States of America. And there's different oppressed groups in different countries in the world. So we might not even be aware who a minority group is in one of those countries that we're not as familiar with. And if we don't have a program committee member who's familiar with the specifics of that oppression in that part of the world, we're likely to miss what is actually an underrepresented individual and why. And we're likely to make poor judgments about it, frankly, because we're just not informed. So I think that this is really challenging, and that's why our charge as this part of this committee is to help infuse as many people from as many parts of the world, as many career stages, as many backgrounds as we possibly can, and encourage them all to get involved at every aspect of OHBM.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wanted to ask Fernanda and Sauriel, what's your take on, would you ever consider getting involved in the program committee? Did you know that that was an option for you? Has anybody in your life, like your mentor, have any of them encouraged you to get involved? And what's your take on that? Maybe Fernanda, you can go first.
Okay, so no, I haven't thought about that. I think
But you should now, because now
Yeah,
a
yeah,
mentor
now
of
I know.
myself is telling you to.
Yes, exactly. I think that that's the greatest challenge, at least for Brazil. I talked to some people in Colombia and they feel the same, that we just don't participate. So we don't submit, and then we are not selected for the keynote speakers or for whatever, because we are not noticed, because we are not participating. And I think that's something would benefit us. We'll probably to have like this. There's this LabMan chapter. There is a chapter of OHBM in Latin America, so we could get together and then spread about these opportunities, and then people will get aware about who is privileged and who is not in these different countries. And something that I wanted to say is that it's so hard because there is this diversity in diversity. And when I talked about in my lab that we should propose a symposium, people are like, but we are not diverse enough. And we thought about how to improve that, because here in Brazil, we are privileged because we are white, we are not person of color, maybe, mostly in our lab. And these are the most underrepresented groups. So we still need to improve how diverse we are, but to the world, we are the underrepresented group. So it's very challenging how to suggest actual improvements.
Thanks for that perspective, Fernanda. Let me go to Sariel and then to Pradeep.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, of course, I would love to be involved in both this committee and the program committee. And yes, I agree with Fernanda. Maybe we are not thinking about submitting because we are more like attendance to the meeting. But I think I agree with these points that you raised here in this slide. Particularly publishing a selection criteria, I should be very important to have I don't want to say a quota, but at least considering that of the total number of keynote speakers, at least half should be women, for example. I think that's the main diversity we have to take into account. Because if I go back to why diversity is important, is I can say three main points. One is that the attendance, or in general, the community is represented by those keynote speakers, right? And so gender is the main factor that should be represented. The other one is that, of course, diversity increases creativity, and that's the main point of these meetings, right? To improve science. So we should include, in your previous slide, you have several criteria. We should try to improve the most we can, of course, right? And that's going to be difficult in 3 or 4 keynote speakers to have all of them, but at least gender should be improved. So that should be put in this selection criteria. And the third point that I consider is really important for diversity is the reducing the gap of this that we all know that in psychology and genetics and also neuroimaging, the most studied subjects are from Western educated, industrialized countries. And I would say genetically from European ancestries. So another point that we can maybe tackle in this criteria is including groups from non-European ancestry countries. So Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Africa, Asia. I mean, Asia should be the second largest group. And so we should have at least one people from Asia or from non-European countries. And European countries, of course, I refer also to Australia, US, and Canada, because the main ancestry is Europe, right? So yeah, that's my main point. And yeah, of course, I would love to be involved in these aspects because I think we have so many things to contribute, as Fernanda said. Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Let's go to Pradeep next.
Yeah, I think we could talk all day about this. It's a tough, wide-ranging topic. So quickly, though, regarding point of encouraging people from Global South or Latin America, I think it's kind of tough. I've been applying to join the council and the program committee many times, but I've always been rejected. And I think one of the reasons is there is a lot of interest, and usually I think some more senior people beat me out and that despite me feeling like I belong in the community very well, and I think I know people and stuff, I've always been rejected. Even to join this committee, I think I had to apply 2 or 3 times, So just to mention that. Second point about program committee making selections, it is a tough job for sure, given like so many topic areas and stuff. But it needs to be said that it's often people, what you call powerful people picking their friends. This is kind of what you call known on the street, So we need to try reduce that often, basically like people just promoting people from their own circles or communities and whatnot. Whether they do it intentionally or not, I don't know, but that's often clearly seen. And some topics get completely neglected, probably because of the point Rosanna was talking about, or Lucina was talking about, because PC is small and the diversity of the program committee makes a big difference on diversity that's reflected in the topics, etc. So we have to make like much more stronger attempts. But that said, it's a tough job because most of these people working on the committees are volunteers. They only have so much time to think about this, and they do what they can, and it's a long process to improve it.
Pradeep, you raise a good point. It is actually a lot of work, and Lucina, I'm sure, can attest to that in selecting the content for OHBM. And one thing is that, again, there's so many factors to consider, and until now, we weren't very intentional about collecting information about diversity, and so it was there. Sometimes the program committee's hands were tied a little bit in terms of not knowing who the people are and and how they can, how they are fulfilling any sort of diversity requirements or, criterion. So now that we're collecting some of that information in the proposals, that helps us out a lot more, but we could probably do better with it. And in a few slides, we can return to that topic. But Miriam, I think you have something to say about this current topic.
If you have time, otherwise we could move on to the next topic, because I think Fernanda raised a really eye-opening kind of point for me, that maybe as a GIC we need to be more proactive, inviting people and kind of getting them to nominate themselves or be part of the community. We have previous members that they are part of that from specific cultural or geographical kind of background, and then we can kind of ask them to help to spread the word, and then also invite people. But also, one of the other things I wanted to mention that Sariel mentioned, we also put it in the blog, that it's not only about where that current speaker is, but then where the training was has happened. So whether that person, how many years has had training in the States or in Europe or in other parts of the world, that could shape way that, and we could somehow take this into consideration when we are inviting and considering that kind of diversity, not only where they are at the moment, but also where the training and kind of previous background has been. So I just wanted to highlight these 2 points that it's really important, and we also mentioned that in the blog.
Sorry about that. I was getting a spam call. Pradeep, do you want to comment one more thing on this topic before we move on?
Yeah, so I think what I was trying to highlight is that there is an insider bias, and I think I mentioned this multiple times in our discussion before. There is good people making great efforts to improve it, but there is also implicit biases in promoting people or friends of their own. And that also needs to, there needs to be a check against that, so to say, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really easy for somebody to look favorably upon a topic that they study, you know, if it's something that they like and study themselves, it's really easy to think, of course, somebody wants to see a keynote on this topic, but it's harder for one's self to put themselves in another person's shoe and think, okay, well, what are other topics beyond what I study that are interesting? And then that also leads to this sort of selection bias. Yeah. Sadia.
Yes, thank you. Just to, yeah, I agree with these two comments, but I think this second point, that having a selection criteria should improve that, right? So if you are kind of required to have half and half male and females, then you're going to invite your friends, but at least they're going to be like diverse friends, right? So I think it is important to have these criteria. Yeah.
Well, sorry, Rosanna, don't want to take over, but quickly, I think we have a fantastic female representation at OHBM, correct me if I'm wrong, compared to many other conferences I've seen, you know? I'm not saying it's perfect, but generally OHBM is a fantastic inclusive gender, what do you call, inclusive conference, you know? The trouble is sometimes they promote the same few females multiple times, and it's kind of like, you know, it's not diverse, you know, like that's another thing to be taken care of, you know. I don't know if we mentioned this in the blog post, but like I suggested to limit the number of talks for a particular person during a period of, I don't know, 2 or 3 years for that same reason, because what's happening is same few females or few underrepresented people have been, what do you call, tokenized for that purpose, and it's not good, really.
Yeah, for this, the OHBM never has a repeat keynote speaker. So we have the list of all speakers since the beginning of time. So you'll never see a keynote twice, but you might see like a symposium speaker more than once. So it would be good for us to do the same thing. We just need a bigger Excel sheet. Right now we have one that tracks all the keynote speakers. We just need one that also tracks symposium presenters for the last, several years.
I think the record keeping has definitely improved. Again, I think there could be some improvements in terms of, okay, yes, well, the person who has the keynote lecture spreadsheet also has to have the other spreadsheets and the education course spreadsheets. And, those all have to be kind of taken into account, just to avoid what Pradeep was talking about. Just for a historical note, though, this committee was started as the Gender Task Force Committee, which was in response to the fact that there was 1 year that I think all of the keynotes were male, and that hopefully will never happen again. And yeah, so I think that some of these areas have been improving and are definitely something that people are paying attention to. Okay, so why don't I go to the next set of recommendations that were mentioned in the blog. This, I think, might go a little bit more towards some of the things that Pradeep was mentioning, although it's not explicitly mentioned here, but we've talked about caregiver support or caretaker support, and this is something that is now offered at OHBM. It's actually a little bit underutilized, in part, I think, because it's under advertised. And so this year, I believe we were able to give every applicant who had a justifiable expense for caretaking was able to get $500 to cover their expenses. Lucina, you'll have to remind me what the number was, because I don't remember. It was like around 10, 16? Okay.
I thought it was something like that, but we were able to support
everyone who applied, which is great. And I think that more people should try to take advantage of that if it would help them. We also think that giving options to give virtual talks is excellent. We got used to that during COVID. Now we've kind of gone back against this, I think in part because some conference facilities don't necessarily have the infrastructure for at least every conference room. And it's very expensive currently to have every conference room have Zoom or some sort of video streaming capability, but I think it still is still something that we should keep pushing for. Another topic that comes up sometimes is allowing for speakers to give talks in their native language. And This is a suggestion, I think, that came out of a discussion that started a few years ago about people who don't necessarily put themselves forward for oral sessions because they're afraid to give a scientific talk in English, but would feel confident giving a talk in their native language. And now that these captioning AI special captioning tools are getting better and better, and translation tools are getting better and better, we might have the ability to actually allow speakers to give talks in their native language, that if it is not English, if they choose to. And right, multilingual auto captions could help with that, obviously. So just wanted to open it up here to other practices that maybe the Diversity and Inclusivity Committee could make to the council or to the program committee, again, to sort of improve diversity in other aspects, whether it's oral sessions or, supporting people in other ways, if folks have ideas for that.
I just wanted to point out a few of the proactive things that have been done over the years in terms of trying to get more leadership from around the world. So one of them has been the formation of a nominating committee. So it used to just be, does anyone want to take a position? And then you put your name in and there's a vote. But now there's a nominating committee that takes all the interested applicants and distributes them across the different leadership roles, like chair and secretary and whatever, so that to ensure that there's diversity, basically the slate is kind of reshuffled in such a way so that it's never going to be all the council members are from North America, or all of the committee members are male. That cannot happen now with the use of this nominating committee. And the nominating committee has the chair of the diversity committee on it and various other people on there. So there's that, and there's been this creation of liaisons between different different council members and different people in these different groups that we're talking about can liaison with the council, or the council members have liaisons that are sent to the student postdoc group, the open science, the diversity, the environmental. So basically a lot of connections have been made between all the different parts. I think the last piece that we haven't done a good job on is the Fernando was mentioning LabMan and the other chapters. I think we have to do a better job of connecting with the chapters. I think that's the last missing piece.
That was going to be my suggestion, because I think if you have the chapters more strong, and they will also spread the word in the countries, because my feeling when I was talking to my lab mates was that, oh, we just don't have enough money, we don't feel represented there, so what we are going to do there? But there is a lot to do. There's a lot of cool people, a lot of cool projects, so we should go and we should fill our space. And I think having this stronger community inside Latin America, that's my case, would be a great advancing into this path.
Fernanda, do you know how active the chapter is, the Latin America chapter? Is it pretty active right now?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure. I haven't reached anyone yet, because I was just trying to know, but I know there are some chapters that are very active, and it would be great to have one like this here, because now we have some very strong voices in neuroscience, and it would be great to have everyone together talking and advancing the field.
Definitely. Saria?
Yes, thank you. I was actually also going to comment about the chapters. Particularly, the chapter for Latin America has not been active the last years. I think especially after the pandemics, it basically just kind of, I don't want to say, but it's like it's dead now. We haven't had anything. Of course, it takes a lot of effort, and all the people were volunteers, but yeah, we need to activate that. And I was also going to propose, like, maybe in the program committee should be like a symposia for the chapters. Maybe not a symposia for each chapter, because if not, nobody's going to go, or something like that. But maybe just this year, the chapter for Latin America, and so that everybody can come and see the work that's being done in Latin America. And maybe it's going to be easier for the the people that propose to present there because they know it's specific for Latin America, right? So, but with that, I don't want to dilute the other aspect of like all the events, symposia, and courses and all that should consider speakers from these non-European countries, and maybe that's something that we can also put into the criteria. Going back to the previous slide, but for this symposia, maybe there should be a symposia for one of the chapters every year. Yeah.
Great suggestion. Pradeep?
I mean, just wanted to make a what's the word? Not make remind people of how busy our annual schedule is. Chapters are great. I think in for some reasons, but I don't know if they add too much value in the full context of our academic life, so to say. It's a lot of work to organize events and get people going. And some students and postdocs who have the time and energy do it, but it's tough to keep it going, Like Sariel, I'm sorry if I'm not saying the name right, was mentioning, if they die out because there is not enough intrinsic natural activity, I think it's completely okay, really, because people are busy, they're doing what they have to. And I think from what my understanding, as long as we keep it open and keep it welcoming for folks to join when they can and want to, I think it's more than enough, In the Open Science SIG, we made phenomenal efforts to try get more students join our global brain hack events during December to try like improve the awareness and get them to join projects and educational sessions, etc. Despite that, we couldn't get many people. I think that was kind of a what you call realistic reminder that there is not enough research basis in different countries, Despite India being like super well connected to the community, being able to speak English and stuff, etc., there's only few neuroscience research centers actually doing research, and there's only like so many people that will come out of it. Same thing with, I don't know, pick a country, let's say in Uganda, if you have like one student from there, I think that's more than enough, right? So point being, I think we are doing fantastic already, and there's not enough space to include more symposia to cover this. It's already tough for us, Like, I think even for this one, it was like kind of a fight to keep it, right? So if you have like, I think we have the China chapter, Australia chapter, and I think it just becomes too many things, not enough connections, and connections among connections. It just never goes anywhere. I think it's having one unified conference is easier and more practical, in my opinion.
Sorry, Alex, do you want to respond? I have some comments about that as well.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Pradeep. I mean, it is not that Latin America researchers don't participate a lot. One reason is that maybe we don't have enough people working on neuroimaging, as you said. But maybe promoting these ideas, this kind of symposium will encourage people to participate. Another way is to basically, how do you say, like, make these chapters, like, invite them to participate, proposing this symposia, and they will have kind of an advantage because they're a chapter. So so if they don't propose, then it is not the fault of the program committee, right? So in that sense, it's gonna be just the chapter that makes the proposal. They will have an advantage, but still, if there are not enough researchers around the world from non-European countries, some chapters not chapters, some events, some symposia could look for, there should be some researchers, and if there is, then you can invite them. If there is not, that you're not, you don't need to invite if there's no people, but we should promote. It's not that because there is not enough, we don't promote it. It's just my point. Thank you.
Pradeep?
Yeah, so I have extensive experience attending these regional events, both in Canada and other places. You know, Ontario and British Columbia have a lot of local, what you call provincial and national events. What often happens is these are people you already know because you either collaborate or do something else together with them, and there is nothing much new going on, so to say. The reason you attend conferences is to talk to new people, learn new things, and develop new connections. That happens only if you go to newer circles, right? Okay, local chapters are helpful if there is no research base or if they are big enough. For example, American conferences are like, then you may still learn a lot because it's a massive research base, right? So it all depends, so to say, right? For even in Canada, my experience with regional conferences was generally like disappointing. I was like, why did I come here? You know, after the first time, because I already know everybody in a way, you know? So that's not to discourage, but just wanted to say that it's very hard for us to do all of this. We need to focus more on the high reward activities. That was my point, not trying to
I guess,
disagree.
yeah, I think that chapters play more or less important roles depending on the circumstances that are happening in the world too. So like during the pandemic, Australians were stuck in Australia, but they have tons of research going on there. So they were able to, you know, have local meetings, which was great for them. But similarly, I just wanted to comment, you know, Latin America, I don't think we've ever had an OHBM conference ever in Latin America. So, you know, I think
that was a long debate for a long time.
Yes. And so I just think that, you know, having a local organizing committee in Latin America, I think could be tremendously helpful, you know, for many reasons, and partially just because of the fact that OHBM has never been to that area of the world.
I pushed very hard on that, but we always failed every time. I can talk about it for half an hour, but let's hear.
Yeah. Okay. Let's let Sariel and Fernanda.
Yes. Basically, as you said, I mean, OHBM has not been organized in Latin America. It has been proposed. I mean, I've been attending more than 10 years. Since I have attended OHBM since 2007. And we were part of the proposal. It was proposed to be on Brazil in 2015, if I remember correctly, because between the Olympics and the World Cup. But it didn't come. And the closest one was going to be in Puerto Rico, which is something in between Latin America and the US. But it got canceled because of the Zika virus, right? So yeah, but we should consider having and taking the OHBM close to Latin America. And if not, I mean, a small solution would be to have a symposium for the Latin American chapter. And I think we should also consider one of your suggestions in the blog was to maybe provide assistance to the speakers to travel, because yeah, our budgets in Latin America are way smaller than in other regions. So considering attending the meeting could be a big effort. And if we know that at least proposing to this chapter, we could have some support to this, would be very good. Yeah.
Well, Sarah said it all. Yeah, the same, because it's too expensive for us. All this stuff.
Yeah.
So having it closer would be great, and also would increase the diversity of the presenters, because the presenters would be here already, and also the financial support. I know it's hard. I've seen you work a lot on that, but maybe the chapter could help filtering the applications, or help try to get money from other organizations. I don't know.
Yeah. So one thing that I didn't mention in my slides is that One of the symposia that's offered each year is called the Local Organizing Committee Symposia. So for example, last year for Glasgow, they had the local people in Glasgow and the UK. I can't remember if it went beyond Glasgow or not, presented. But obviously, if you never go to Latin America, you will never have the opportunity to have a Latin American symposia, given by a group from Brazil or a group from Mexico. So I just wanted to point that out. Miriam.
Just a quick point regarding like this, not only the financial hurdle of coming from those countries, but also the visa issue that I've been hearing and seeing that a lot of students, they have issues like coming from China, from other parts of the world, especially going to Canada and US. And so that is a big, like, I know this, but we can't solve this here, and then we don't have any say in it. But I've been having this issue for many years because of my original passport, and then still even though that I have another passport, it's still an issue. And I really feel for these students that they wanted to come to these meetings, but because of that visa, it's either they are not able to, or it's so delayed and so stressful that they just give up. So I think having just virtual events at some point, or the options, at least we could cover this group that they are having issues with visa or with financial kind of support.
Thanks for that comment. Okay, so maybe in the interest of time, I'll just go to my very last slide.
Sorry, just a few.
Yeah, sure.
Go very short one about that.
Yeah.
Most Latin American countries are very friendly about visas, so it's another.
There you go.
Latin America.
Problem solved.
Yep.
Perfect.
So,
go ahead.
For the benefit of people who are not familiar with prior discussion on this topic, we discussed and debated this extensively on Twitter over time. Generally, people are favorable to the idea, but when they make the calculations on how to make it happen logistically and financially, it ends out being a tough decision. The summary of the arguments against it, I've heard, I'm one of the strongest pushers to take OHBM to either Africa or Latin America. But generally the excuses, in my opinion, they give is most of our attendees come from the Western countries, Europe and North America. And if you put it there, it's going to be much more expensive. There's going to be less attendance. And two, many of these cities in like not Latin America, or let's say Africa or India, do not have the facilities required to host such large audience, right? And two and three, they also need these networks who can actually deliver on hosting it, meaning they need to have a sufficient and large enough research base and volunteers in terms of both local organizing committee and somebody strong and senior and experienced to get it done. And that may sometimes prove to be a challenge too. So often what happens is, like, because there is not going to be any, proposal to host from these areas, and then there is not enough senior people pushing it to happen in these areas, it never happens. So it's a network effect kind of thing, So it rotates between, at least OHBM is somewhat better than SFN, which is always in Chicago or San Diego in the USA. And I try to get them to consider, but they don't give a damn. But OHBM is better than that. This is just an unfortunate reality we have to live with because of where the research funding is and where most of the neuroscience research base is. That's what it is, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks, Pradeep. It's a complicated issue, but we'll keep pushing on it. And with some of the voices that we've collected here and the opinions that we've collected here, we have even more ammunition. So we've actually probably already kind of tackled a lot of these topics, but I just wanted to see if people had any final thoughts about either measuring diversity better in better ways. You know, now we're collecting some of these metrics a little more regularly. You know, we're asking people to sort of self-identify in their abstract submissions and in their submissions for symposia and for educational courses. You know, how do we best evaluate whether, you know, some of the things that we're doing to promote diversity, are they working? Are they not working? You know, how do we measure progress? Obviously, we want to have better record keeping that we already talked about, and also make those, because right now I think it's mostly been internally generated and shared, but I think it should be, you know, posted on the website. You know, we can hopefully post it on our website so that we can sort of keep an eye on these metrics and kind of evaluate how we're doing over the years and whether we're making positive progress or not. But I wanted to give this group an additional opportunity to discuss this. If there's anything we haven't covered yet.
Yeah, maybe for item 1, I think one feasible solution is to sum up the diversity scores for a participant, so to say, in terms of their, what you call, ethnicity, nation of origin, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and whatnot, and maximize that score along with the intersectionality when possible. I think for a few years I've been wanting to develop a toolbox to make this easy for program committee, but for anybody listening to this at the conference, if you want to help out doing that, that would be great. I think that's basically you have to do energy maximize, some sort of optimization on the selected speakers to pick a few that maximizes a few of these scores, including diversity and intersectionality. I think that's the most defensible way to do it. And automating, I think, would reduce some of the intrinsic biases people have, not just biases, but blind spots the program committee might have in selecting speakers. So that's one thing that I suggest.
One thing that I worry about sometimes when we are coming up with these metrics is, again, we're coming at it with a very North American lens. So, you know, we are very hyper attuned to some of these dimensions, to certain dimensions of diversity, but other parts of the world are either less attuned to them, or they might be hyper attuned to other dimensions of diversity that we're not considering. And so as an international organization, how do we tackle that?
Well, it comes with a big asterisk. Most of our data is self-reported. The limitations of the noise from the self-reported data, we do the best we can. And so long as we do our best, I think we're fine, you know? So we can only do so much. You know, I think even this is far beyond many other people, many other societies do, to be honest.
Miriam, you've lived in a lot of different places around the world. How do you think we should be thinking about this, and what kinds of metrics do you think we should be collecting?
I actually don't like the metrics, because it's really hard to put diversity in metrics. And how would you define it? Is it like, if it's only gender or this kind of asterisks that we have to respond to, that's easier, but diversity has different layers. So I recognize myself, maybe like the country that I'm born, the country that I was trained, the country that I work now. So like it's really hard to quantify this. So I don't have a good answer for this, but I think one suggestion that we had to consider all of this background information, that where the training has happened, or where not only where do they live or do they work now, but all of the trainings, because that could shape the way that you see diversity. But one of the practices that we've had in Australia, and I thought it was really good one, was that for every grant that we had to apply to, or like senior people would apply, there was a stream that you needed to include a middle career or early career researcher, and that to kind of was a mentoring type initiative, but also to increase diversity in the grant kind of engine, because there was like particular group of people that they were quite senior and then they were quite experienced and they would get all of this funding. So then that would initiate to encourage early career research and also provide some funding. But so we discussed that we could also consider this type of initiative where we bring early career or like people who are from Latin America and they don't even nominate themselves, to kind of bring them in, and hopefully at some point we might have a better idea of how we can increase the diversity of the whole program or the whole kind of community.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think, yeah, metrics have issues. People target them sometimes just like we do, or H indexes and stuff like that. But that said, I think they reduce some of the subjectivity associated with people making decisions by themselves, in a sense. I think nowadays there is actually a lot of research on DEI in the last, 5-10 years. So we know a lot of factors in terms of all the factors you mentioned. I think nation of origin, training, where you trained, which labs you're connected to, what topic you work on. I think we can, if algorithm would easily take all that into account in computing such scores, so to say, whereas a program committee member may not even think about some of these if you don't actually quantify them, right? So maybe we need to do both in terms of have the toolbox suggest some things and then program committee make an informed decision, just to ensure nothing is not accounted for, right? So
yeah, I agree. I think these kind of discussions, this kind of blog that we are writing, this prompts people to think about diversity from different angles. Is it am I more diverse than someone else, or how do you choose between more or less diverse? So I think these kind of because even when we were writing this blog, this idea that was tossed out that we could also consider educational background, where they were trained, that was also a trigger for me. It's it's actually important, not only where do they work or geographical kind of location, but also how. So even for us that we are working in this committee, it was really interesting to be implicit and transparent about it. So I'm sure that this initiative, the more that we talk about it, the more people get some ideas, and then hopefully we reach some agreement at that point.
Having a database and algorithmic decision tool would actually help that. One of the problems Rosanna was talking about, people leaving committees and taking all the institutional knowledge with them, So the algorithms and provenance of these databases would help solve some of this issue. If somebody gave 3 talks in the last 3 years, the algorithm won't forget it, whereas a person might, especially if the talk was in a different area, they don't even keep track of,
Okay. Fernanda, you contributed, I think, to the blog as well. Is there anything that we missed that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you think is really important to express here?
For now, I think it's all. I think I will know it when it happens, because last year was my first meeting. So yeah, I think you made a very good thing with the diversity inclusion in the submission and so on.
We're glad you're here. Sariel?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to raise again a point that actually Pradeep mentioned before. And maybe if it is not the case to have it here, you can cut it from the recording. But also diversity should be in the attendance, right? So I would love to have more support for students from all over the world. I think it was in 2015 in Hawaii when they implemented the travel awards, which I think there were 15 awards. One of my 2 students got it, so that's why I think it was great. But if I remember correctly, the last ones were 7 awards, something like that. So I think it has come to having fewer and fewer awards. So I would reconsider that. I would love to have more awards. Maybe, yeah. I mean, we could work on that. And I don't want to. I mean, merit awards are also very important, but most of them are again awarded to large groups that have big funding, and so they. I mean, the travel awards will have more impact because if not, the students don't go, basically. And larger groups with larger funding, maybe they don't have a large impact, those awards. But anyway, I wanted to raise also that. And again, just please consider having speakers from non-European countries when they apply, basically. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that even some people don't even necessarily know that they can apply for these awards. So sometimes even the just the getting the word out is helpful. So please spread the word. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on a Friday afternoon here, at least on the East Coast. Miriam, it's probably bedtime for you, so thanks especially to you for joining us. And I know that many of you will be at OHBM and we can continue that conversation in person.
Thank you so much for organizing, Rosanna.
My
That was
pleasure.
really nice conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Same here. I'll stop the recording now.